Hello and welcome to the table, Baldurs Gate, D&D, and Lord of the Rings fans. Have a seat, grab your favorite drink, and settle in for a unique modded character build and subclass of the Ranger. Tonight we're going through all 12 levels of the Horizon Walker, which takes the classic Ranger archetype and gives it an extra planar flavor of hunting threats from beyond. Massive credits to Sumrath Dagnan for putting the time and effort in bringing the themes and mechanics of this class to life, and also Sumrath is quickly becoming one of my personal favorite mod authors on the Baldurs Gate 3 mod Nexus forum, mainly because they are doing so much effort into taking 5th edition classes and using the game mechanics to get as close as possible to the actual tabletop class. And specifically for this class in particular, this is, to quote Sumrath, 5th edition, rules as written, faithful version of the Horizon Walker Conclave Ranger subclass. Thus it is technically a lore-friendly class, and as always, I genuinely really commend Sumrath, the other mod authors on the Nexus, for utilizing everything available in the game to get as close as possible to the tabletop counterpart. And yes, I know, for all the D&D lore aficionados out there, they may point out some things are not exactly to the tabletop class, but to be honest, this is a video game, so there's only so much that the mod authors may have to work with, but also given that they've really gone 110%, but I won't dive too much into that rabbit hole. But mainly, for those who are new to the channel, one of my main focuses for videos is creating unique Baldurs Gate 3 characters, utilizing mods both for enhancement and roleplay, specifically giving you different types of replayability. Now, if that's something you're really into, I would personally love to hear your favorite character builds in the comment below, and also let's get a very in-depth discussion going on characters that you would build with this class, what you would multi-class this with, whether it's vanilla classes or with other modded classes, or completely out of left field character build requests too. And yes, side note, I have videos of narrative-driven Total War Warhammer campaigns of both modded and non-modded factions, showing and telling unique stories of each of those factions. Plus also, I've even based some of my characters off of Warhammer factions and characters too, like with my previous video using Sumrath Dagnan's Arcane Archer, basically creating the Sisters of Avalorn. I'll link that video in the pinned comment below too. Sumrath has some really sick class mods too. And if you love talking shop about character builds or epic story-driven war campaigns, consider hitting those like, subscribe, and bell icon notifications for more unique adventures like that. And also, new viewers who only stumbled upon this video and want to know how we're going to do this character build, the way I want to structure this and organize it is going through first the starting level, specific choices with race and other beginning features, levels 2 through 12, and then wrapping up with specific gear and equipment to complement the build in terms of roleplay or improving stats or spells. When it comes to character builds, I really do try to stick with choices with the abilities, spells, equipment, overall level ups to suit characters thematically or keeping in line with what the mod author intended for the class. And yes, I may slip into choosing metagame choices and being super strategic. In fact, side note, this class is very strategic with using extra actions/attacks. I am aware in the D&D and Baldur's Gate communities, players are sometimes all about the min-maxing leveling, but also there are some that really just want to stick with roleplay choices and not be so nitpicky about leveling. But do what matters most to you, or the thing that brings you the most fun, whether it is a number crunching with damage output, or just building and role-playing one of your favorite characters. And yes, returning viewers have heard me say this too, we're going through all 12 levels as the class alone, showcasing it and everything there is to offer, and by going through all 12 levels, that's my personal way of saying thank you to Sumrath for putting that time and effort in, like I mentioned. And yes, as an added thank you, I will of course leave the link to the mod in the pinned comment below. It should be the very top one, and also below it I'll add a few other mods that I use to pair with it as well. We will most likely be saving separate videos for multi-classing this together with base game classes or other modded classes, really just trying to see what kind of wild synergies we can come up with. And yes, before we get into the build, I did welcome Lord of the Rings fans in, and I do want to state that I will be basing this build off of one of the Ringwraiths from Lord of the Rings. And yes, a side note, I know there's going to be some Lord of the Rings lore aficionados out there that will say this isn't exactly a canon Ringwraith, but this is specifically Adunaphel from the Middle-earth trading card game and other various fanfics. And yes, I know most of the Nazgul/9 Ringwraiths were not named, however, it does provide a good opportunity for interpretation, and I've been wanting to speculate and create more builds off characters that don't have that much backstories to them. And yes, Lord of the Rings lore aficionados, please let me know in the comments any corrections to Adunaphel or to the 9 Ringwraiths in general. I generally do love speaking about the lore and history of some of my personal favorite fandoms and also characters with others. And Adunaphel essentially is one of the few female 9 Ringwraiths who fell to Sauron, and from what I read on the trading card wiki or some of the other fanfics, she was of Numenorean descent and owns several fiefdoms or kingdoms in Harad. And yes, Gondor and the men of Numenor did settle in other places besides Eriador and Gondor itself. They technically did colonize parts of Harad, and maybe even as far Harad, as far south as they could go, really, to establish control, dominance, and colonies. But essentially, just like with the other Ringwraiths, she wanted more power, and of course was tempted by Sauron, who was known as Anatar at the time, with the ring of power that he gave her to provide eternal life and also a chance to forever rule all of her fiefdoms and never to fade away. In a sense, she did get what she was promised with being immortal, but of course her kingdoms did crumble to ruin over time, and thus all she had left was serving the will of Sauron. But without further ado, let's get into the first level of this build. For the starting race, yes, I know human may seem bland and boring, but we are using a mod that pretty much adds the human variant to Baldurs Gate 3, and yes, it may be slightly overpowered with the different race passives that we can choose from. There are plenty, and I am going to be a little bit metagamey here when I get into the specific race passives, but also you could justify having a Githyanki or also a Githzerai from another race mod that I have, which honestly would work incredibly well with the mechanics and also especially roleplay too, with hunting down mind flayers. Going back to human variant, we do get 3 choices of race passives, and the 3 that I specifically will pick and lean into the features of this class are Fast Hands, gain an additional bonus action. This complements what Sumrath has said in the mod description. To quote them, "This subclass is very dependent on action economy, and since my implementation is based on tabletop rules, you should read the description and article thoroughly if you are not familiar with 5th edition. The mod does not make changes to the core game actions, but this subclass has features that are written in a way that are different than how Baldur's Gate 3 has things implemented. Shove is an attack action instead of a bonus action, and I have done my best to account for BG3 players playing without optional 5th edition mods, but be aware you will be missing out on some functionality. As such, although not required, I highly recommend you use the 5th edition action economy mod, which, going into the description of that mod, It basically changes a few things around, with shove being a full action, can use to help distract an enemy. Jump only costs his movement and not an action, and also adds dodge as an option for your character too. But fast hands goes back to what Sumrath was saying about action economy. Just having the option to essentially do another action, potentially another attack, with the fast hands feature is going to really help us out in combat in all stages of the game, early, mid, and late. I also decided to go with Dread Ambusher, specialized in taking out foes swiftly and ruthlessly, +3 bonus to initiative, essentially giving us a higher chance to go first in combat, and specifically on our first turn. Our movement speed increases by 3 meters, and you can make an attack that deals additional 1d8 damage. And yes, going back to the action economy, being able to dish out potentially more damage at the start of battle could really be a make or break for you. And also to cover our bases too, with not being the most tanky character, I decided to go with the third option, Uncanny Dodge. Use your lightning quick reflexes to protect yourself. When an attack hits you, only take half the usual damage, so basically cutting down the potential damage output from our enemies really adds to the survivability, and also a greater chance for us as a ranger to keep fighting and also keep dishing out damage ourselves. For the natural explorer choice, I decided to go with Beast Tamer. Cultivated a strong bond with animals, and we can cast Find Familiar without expending a spell slot. You know, all of my returning viewers know me. I love having additional companions and minions at my side, so this is going to be very useful for us. And also, going back to what Sumrath said, not expending a spell slot means efficient action economy. My apologies if any of the new or returning viewers hear me constantly harp on action economy, and it's just really something I want to lean into with this class. For the favorite enemy, I decided to go with Bounty Hunter. Proficiency on investigation, very useful for role-playing, and creatures you hit with ensnaring strike, either ranged or melee, have disadvantage on their saving throw. Pretty useful both roleplay and combat wise. For the background, I decided to go with Noble for roleplay purposes because Adunaphel and the rest of the Ringwraiths were noble humans, well, some were Numenoreans. It wasn't stated that all of them were Numenoreans specifically, but it gives us useful skills of persuasion and history. For the ability output, this is going to be a little bit wonky, but please bear with me. Dexterity is what we're going to rely on a lot since we're going to be using ranged attacks often, and also it will add to our armor class too. Constitution is going to be a respectable 14, giving us some health and bonuses, plus a little bit of survivability in combat. And Wisdom, our spellcasting does rely on it, so we're going to dump a couple of points into there, getting it to a very respectable 16. Overall a +3. Charisma we're going to leave alone, and we are going to be taking points out of strength and intelligence. This can be justified roleplay wise, with Ringwraiths not being the strongest or hardiest characters, and intelligence, well, hate to break it to you, Ringwraiths weren't exactly the smartest or had too much wit about them when it came to not understanding that the rings would corrupt him, but that's for lore aficionados on the Lord of the Rings side to talk about. But also for skill proficiencies, I like having skill proficiencies in stealth, history, as well. You can argue that Adunaphel herself knows a little bit of her Numenorean background. Investigation is going to be another good one here. You can mix and match whichever ones that you want to put points into. I'll put a few extra points into insight, and also with animal handling. Insight will be a +5. Animal handling +5, survival, strong +5, and persuasion a respectable +2. At level 2, we gain 2 options of spells. The first one, I would personally pick up Ensnaring Strike. For the ranged attack, your attack summons thorny vines that possibly ensnare your target. This is a good stoppage spell and control spell too, keeping your enemies in place. And also, for the second one, for crowd control, I personally like picking up Hail of Thorns. Weapon damage 1d10 piercing. The thorns deal weapon damage to the target and then explode. The explosion deals additional 1 to 10 piercing damage on the target and surrounding creatures. On a miss, thorns will still explode, and on a save, targets will still take half damage from the explosion. One thing I like about both of these is they can be used as a bonus action. So, just like what the mod author was saying, utilizing bonus actions and having our additional fast hands are going to make these spells pair very well with that, and also being able to make more additional actions or attacks. For the fighting style, I would personally pick up archery, giving us a +2 bonus to ranged weapon attacks. Most likely we're going to be trying to use a hit and run strategy of teleporting around, running around, and firing while moving essentially. At 3rd level, the spell that I would pick up here would be Fog Cloud. Blinds and heavily obscures creatures within it. This is another good crowd control spell, but more so on the status effect of blinding them and also causing a visibility havoc. The subclass Horizon Walker becomes available at this level too. We gain the cantrip of Detect Portal, gain advantage on perception checks for 1 minute, aka 10 turns. We gain the action of Planar Warrior's Mark, 1 to 8 damage. Choose one creature you can see within 9 meters of you. The next time you hit that creature on this turn with a weapon attack, all damage dealt by that attack becomes force damage, and the creature takes extra 1 to 8 force damage from the attack for 1 turn. Again, another bonus action. This again is going to really pair well with our fast hands choice that we picked at 1st level. We also gain the spell Protection from Good and Evil. Protect an ally against the attacks and powers of aberrations, celestials, elementals, fae, fiends, and undead until long rest. At 4th level, the feat option that I would personally pick here would be Ability Improvement, putting a point into Dexterity, rounding it up to 18, and thus a solid +4. And then also in Wisdom, giving us 17, and yes, I know that is an odd number, but the choice that we will make later down the track when we pick up another feat will eventually round it out to 18, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself there. At level 5, we gain the extra attack feature. The spell choice I would pick up here would be Silence for us to be anti-mage and also controlling enemy casters. We also gain an additional spell of our own of Misty Step, surrounded by a silver mist, teleport to an unoccupied space we can see. Again, a bonus action, so that's going to really play well into our choices for action economy. At level 6, go ahead and choose whichever options you want for favorite enemy and natural explorer. For roleplay purposes, I decided to go with Mage Breaker, gaining proficiency in Arcana and also the ability to cast a True Strike with our attack roll, and thus gaining advantage on enemy casters. Natural Explorer, I decided to go with Wasteland Wanderer Fire, resistance to fire damage, and yes, I know Ringwraiths in Lord of the Rings aren't exactly resistant to fire damage, but this is definitely something that they would want to pick up for themselves. At level 7, the spell choice I would pick up here would be Summon Beast, essentially giving us another ally to help fight alongside us in battle and also to distract our enemies. The cantrip we pick up here is Etherealness. Enter the ethereal plane for 1 turn. While on the ethereal plane, you can only affect and be affected by other creatures on that plane. Creatures that aren't on the ethereal plane can't perceive you and can't interact with you. And you ignore all objects and effects that aren't on the ethereal plane. So essentially, we could kind of use this as a get out of jail free card, and also give us a little bit of time to reposition ourselves and get that advantage on our enemies and, well, jump on our enemies too. At level 8, we gain the class-specific feature of Land Stride. You have become an expert at moving through the wilderness. Difficult terrain no longer slows us down. And for the feat here, I would personally pick up Gift of the Gem Dragon, increasing our wisdom by 1, rounding it out to a respectable 18 and thus +4. When we take damage from a creature within 3 meters of us, you can use your reaction to deal force damage and attempt to push the creature away. This is a really good feature here too, in order for us to keep enemies at bay, but not just with keeping them at bay, being able to deal damage with them when they actually attack us. And it's essentially like a reflect damage or retaliatory strike. At level 9, the spell choice I would personally pick up here would be Lightning Arrow. Sure, if you want, you can choose Fire Arrow for flavor or your personal roleplay purposes, but I like the potential crowd control effects with this of 6 to 48 potential damage. After the arrow hits, smaller bolts snake out from the target toward nearby creatures. So this is a good way of dishing out damage or punishing enemies who are clumped together. Haste is another spell we pick up here. Target yourself or an ally to become hasten, gain an action, become faster, and gain +2 to armor class. But this is a little risk reward addition to after 10 turns, we become lethargic, consumed by exhaustion in the aftermath of haste, can't move or take actions, bonus actions, or reactions. So it's best to try to either, if you use this at the beginning of combat, try to make the most out of the 10 turns. If you want to save it up near the middle or end stage of combat, make sure that you finish off as many enemies or pretty much all of them as possible. At level 10, we gain Hide in Plain Sight, camouflage ourselves with the environment to become invisible and gain a +10 bonus to stealth checks as long as you stand still. Also, when it comes to favorite enemy and Natural Explorer, pick whichever one you want here. I personally find Wasteland Explorer Cold useful. You could also go with Poison too. I think I might go with Poison actually, because of the fact that Poison, well, does damage over time, and also I'll pick up Sanctified Stalker as a roleplay purpose because Adunaphel was a noble Numenorean, and I'm assuming that she was the type of person to adhere to the ways of good and was essentially able to fight against the forces of evil and Sauron before she fell to darkness. At level 11, the spell choice I would pick up here would be Conjure Barrage to dish out 2d8 slashing damage, channel your weapon's essence into a destructive widespread volley, another good option for crowd control ability. And for the subclass feature and cantrip, we gain Distant Strike, gain the ability to pass between the planes in a blink of an eye. When you use an attack action, you can teleport up to 3 meters before each attack to an unoccupied space you can see. If you attack at least 2 different creatures with the action, you can make 1 additional attack with it against a 3rd creature. Again, with Distant Strike, this is a really insane feature here too. Being able to reposition ourselves constantly before making our attacks, and then also it rewards us for choosing different targets too. We gain the cantrip Distant Strike Teleport as part of your attack action. Teleport up to 3 meters to an unoccupied space you can see before you attack. Teleporting initiates attack action, so it must be immediately followed with an attack, movement, or a combination of both. You will be unable to spend other action resources until this is complete. So yes, order of things is very much important, and this is a good thing to have planned ahead, or to really just strategize your positioning too. And finally, at level 12, to round things out, I would personally pick up Martial Adept, and there is a mod that changes up some of the base game feats too. Learn 2 melee Battlemaster maneuvers from an abbreviated list, Maneuvers do not cost a superiority die to use, but can only be used once per turn. The once per turn is very generous too, so each time it's our turn, we have the potential to use one of these. I like picking up Martial Adept. You can use both your action and bonus action on a turn to attack a target with advantage and deal additional 1d8 damage. This is going to be really good either for range or a melee attack. Martial Adept Maneuvering Attack is going to be more of a support kind of attack for us and our allies. You may make an attack that deals an additional 1d8 damage. On a hit, select a friendly creature to gain half its movement speed. It will not provoke attacks of opportunity. Alright friends, when it comes to gear and weapon choices, I'm going to be choosing ones that are oddly specific but surprisingly pair well together, and also lean into the strengths of this class, including the action economy bonuses. The headpiece, I will be using Marksmanship Hat, +1 bonus to ranged attack and the thrown attack rolls, giving us that extra edge to actually hit our targets. Nymph Cloak, this is a really specific choice here. Having Dominate Person, make a humanoid fight alongside you. Every time it takes damage, it must make a wisdom saving throw against our domination for 10 turns. I like using this as to essentially have like a mind control ability and forcing enemies to turn on each other and causing as much havoc and confusion across the battlefield. The Yuan-Ti Scale Mail means we can add our full Dex modifier, which at this point, when we choose specific feats, is a +4. Adds that to our armor class. Additionally, this armor does not impose disadvantage on stealth ability checks, and we get another +1 to initiative rolls, stacking up with our initial passive 2 of a +3 from the first leveling screen. Astroplate Gloves, whenever we score a critical hit, we deal an additional 1d6 force damage on top of the critical hit damage. This is just a nice little bonus for us, and it's a nice little nod and roleplay to the Horizon Walker of adding force damage to our attacks. The wearer gains advantage on melee attack rolls when surrounded by 2 or more foes. This is kind of like a little incentive for us, like, hey, even if we get surrounded by mobs of enemies, we can still not just hold our own, but also gain advantage on taking them out. And we get a +1 to strength saving throws. Briskwind Boots, critical swiftness after scoring a critical hit or killing a hostile creature. Movement speed is restored to its maximum. So this is kind of like a little reward thing too of us having an aggressive playstyle, taking out enemy mobs or minor enemies, and then getting an increased movement range. That's going to make things ridiculous of us like literally running and gunning it on the battlefield. Amulet of Ball, on first hit, inflict bleeding upon targets that have max hit points. This is definitely something that we can use against boss enemies too, and essentially get damage over time going. Killer Sweetheart, when we kill a creature, our next attack roll will be a critical hit. So this is going to be a good order of things, or order of killing I should say. Kill off a one minor enemy, and then focus your next attacks on a higher tier or tougher enemy to get that critical hit, and thus also pairing well with our Astral Plate gloves too. When we score that critical hit, that will be extra damage plus an additional 1d6 force damage. I also like picking up the Burnished Ring for Paralyzing Ray. This is to keep our enemies in place and paralyze them for 2 turns while we're teleporting and zooming around the battlefield. For the melee attack weapon, I like personally using Crimson Mischief. Prey upon the weak. Weapon deals an additional 1d4 piercing damage against targets with 50% of their hit points or fewer, on the top of the already potential 9 to 20 damage overall. When it's used in our main hand, Redvine's Savagery, when you make an attack with advantage, the target takes an additional 7 piercing damage. So even for a small dagger, it has a whole lot of overall damage potential. For the ranged weapon choice, I like the dead shot. Improved critical number we need to roll a critical hit while attacking is reduced by 1. This effect can stack, and essentially it gives us a chance to make more critical hits and thus more massive damage output, and of course force damage as well. Keen attack. The wielder doubles their proficiency bonus when rolling range attacks with this weapon unless they have disadvantage, and we get the weapon enchantment +2. So all in all, we have equipment that really provides us a very aggressive playstyle too, and also leans into the aggressive playstyle of the Horizon Walker. Alright friends, that is my character showcase and class showcase of the Horizon Walker Ranger subclass. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with some of my choices in leveling, equipment, or weapons, and also if you would choose different options too. I personally really want to hear your types of builds. Mine was kind of optimization, but also a little bit of roleplay for one of my Lord of the Rings Ringwraiths, and also for all of the returning and new viewers who watched this far in the video, thank you so much for your support and also for showing interest in the class. Please go check it out, support the mod author. Lots of really good potential here in terms of different types of playstyles too, and also let me know what you would like to see this multi-classed with too. I just have a good feeling that this would be very wild to see with certain modded classes too. And for those who are interested in more D&D, Baldurs Gate, and also a bit of Warhammer and Elder Scrolls adventures, I'd love to have you join us on those, friends. And remember to hit those like, subscribe, and bell icon notifications, and I'll save you a seat at the table for those next adventures. Take care and farewell.